Welcome to Empower Ed, a PIQE podcast where we talk about the issues that matter most to families, schools, and communities. I'm Ileana Gallego, and together we're unlocking the power of education. Today, I am joined by two wonderful guests who are doing critical work to make sure families and students have the tools they need to thrive in a digital world. Norma Fernandez is the CEO of Everyone On, a national nonprofit dedicated to closing the digital divide. Since becoming CEO in 2019, Norma has led efforts that have connected thousands of households to high-speed internet, expanded digital skills training nationwide, and raised over $10 million to advance digital equity. She's a nationally recognized leader in digital inclusion and a 2024 Digital Equity Champion. Joining her is Dr. Ryan Alcantara, Interim President and CEO of the Parent Institute for Quality Education. With more than 25 years of experience advancing educational equity and social justice, Dr. Alcantara brings a deep understanding of how family engagement and education systems can work together to support student success, especially for first-generation and bilingual families. Dr. Alcantara also serves as an adjunct faculty member at the USC Price School of Public Policy. Together, they're here to talk about the digital equity and digital literacy and why access, skills, and family engagement are essential to educational success today. It's a pleasure to have you both here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
you for the invitation.
Norma, I want to start with you. We've shared a bit about Everyone On and its work to close the digital divide. I'd love to hear your story. What drew you to this work, and why does it matter so much to you?
I joined the organization at the end of 2013, and I was coming from LAUSD, which is the second largest school district in the country. And I left around that time when they started distributing, for the first time ever, take-home devices, iPads. So I feel that at the time, the existing superintendent was definitely ahead of his time, thinking about remote learning, getting devices into student homes. So I was transitioning out of LAUSD when that was happening and entering Everyone On that was very much focused on broadband adoption, getting devices into people's homes, and digital literacy. And so I saw the connection between, students being handed these amazing devices that they were now going to use at home to continue to learn and do homework. Yet I saw that they were going to homes, most of them, that didn't have internet to actually support their ability to leverage those iPads at home. And so it was just coincidence that I happened to land at Everyone On at that time. And I brought with me that sort of purview into the work. And what's always interested me in my career has been the opportunity to connect communities, and in particular, underserved communities, low-income communities, those that have been historically underserved, connecting them to tools, resources, information, so that they could use it for their benefit, right? In whatever way that may mean for them. And in 2013, broadband adoption in California was still at 70%. Fast forward to today, we have more than 95% of the state households in the state who are covered. And so at that time, I knew that the internet was imperative, and yet there were so many households, and in particular, similar to those that we serve both at PIQE and Everyone On, primarily low income, and also primarily communities and households of color. So I wanted to link my passion and interest in connecting communities to tools, to resources and information with the work that I did. And at that time, and I still do, felt that Everyone On really accomplishes that, right? Providing the on-ramps to opportunities through technology access, but also through digital skills and confidence that people gain from digital skills training.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I think this helps us understand a lot better the reason behind not just yourself, but Everyone On as an organization. So thank you for sharing that. Dr. Alcantara, PIQE's mission is all about empowering families to be active partners in their children's education. How does PIQE advance digital equity and digital literacy for the families you serve?
Sure. Well, it became, prior to the pandemic, all of our programs were delivered in person, but due to the pandemic, we came into the virtual world offering our programs through there, and we continue to have that as an option for school districts and for families so that they can access. And it's been really helpful in our ability to make our programs accessible. But it has certainly raised the question about digital equity and the ability for folks to access that program. So we've developed a strong infrastructure that supports families through that process. We've been very intentional through needs assessments and conversations with our families to understand not just their need within the set of programs that we do, and advancing educational equity and access to education and navigating institutions, but how accessible are our online programs. And so it's everything from guiding families in the use of their technology to supporting efforts to expand access to broadband so that the communities that we serve, particularly I look at rural communities, have that same ability to access technology.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we jumped into talking about digital equity and digital literacy, but Norma, maybe it's good for us to define those concepts. And why do you think it's important to think about them together?
Sure. And I definitely want to respond to Dr. Ryan's comments right now about PIQE responding to communities, around the pandemic, specific to that. But also what we know came out of that was this highlight or spotlight, which was like a dark spotlight on what we as a society and institutions were missing, which was how technology and digital access is connected to everything else we're trying to accomplish, improving educational outcomes, economic mobility, ensuring healthy, safe communities, right? Technology access or digital access is so critical to that. So I thought it was so amazing that PIQE stepped into that space to ask, what do families need, but also not just related to the pandemic, but what else do you need to continue to support you in particular through this time? And digital access was one of those things that came out of the surveys, right? And we immediately started partnering, bringing our services that we provided everyone on and complementing them to PIQE's work that has already been super impactful and ensuring that folks had, the immediate needs like, COVID tests, school supplies, food, but also do they have broadband in the form of hotspots? Do they have computers? And do parents know how to use the technology in order to stay in touch with their kids' teachers, right, through Zoom and Gmail and all those video platforms. So I know we'll talk about the partnership in a bit, but I just want to highlight that because I thought that was a very critical, and strategic step and investment that PIQE made and being very responsive to the community. Now, when we think about digital equity and digital literacy, and I'll even include the term digital inclusion. Digital inclusion, if you will, is the work that happens to get to digital equity. So digital inclusion is promoting broadband adoption programs, enrollment events where we help people connect to affordable internet. It includes distributing devices. It includes setting up computer labs so folks have somewhere to go. And it also includes the technical and customer support that people may often need if they're receiving a computer for the first time. And certainly it also includes the digital skills training, right? So digital inclusion is the work that happens to reach or achieve digital equity. Digital equity being ensuring that everyone has access to robust broadband, that it's not just a smartphone that people are depending on, but that they actually have fiber to their home, ideally, right? And actually, ideally, that we have options wherever and wherever we are. We step out of our house and that we have public Wi-Fi at a park. We go to a restaurant, coffee shop, there's a Wi-Fi there, and certainly in the home. And so equity is ensuring that there's equitable distribution of broadband infrastructure, that everybody has access to a device, again, whether that's their smartphone, a desktop, and that folks have options for training. One of the biggest things that gaps that we see at Everyone On is while folks may have smartphones and computers at home, and certainly internet, many of the families, I think in particular PIQE serves, that we serve, don't have the digital skills training, not because they don't, or in the digital literacy, right? Digital literacy, knowing how to navigate the digital world, that's that concept. And though folks may have computers at home, it doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to use them and harness them in a way that they could then, look for jobs, build their resume online, for example, conduct their telemedicine appointment. And so that's a big gap that we see in the work that we do, is folks still lacking those digital literacy, those digital skills. And it's a lot of the work that we've done with PIQE is training, in particular, parents, right? Given who we serve, parents, so that they are equipped to be able to navigate the digital world, not just to help their students, but also to help themselves and their communities.
Yes, because the three concepts need to be together. It wouldn't be the same, or it doesn't make enough impact just to give them the devices, or just to teach them somewhere else, like in a classroom, and then they go home and they don't have these devices. So they need to be seen together.
Exactly.
So it is clear that we're all moving through an increasingly, digital world. Why is it more important than ever for everyone in every community to have strong digital skills? This is for both of you, whoever wants to start.
I'll start. I mean, there's an increasing expectation that folks access, like you think of things like the FAFSA, federal financial aid forms. Back in the days when I was applying to go to school, it was a paper form, and then you had both versions available. Now it's all digital. And so for many, if you have access to the internet, you're utilizing your phone. And imagine filling out complicated forms like that on your phone. And so it's really, really important to be thinking about internet in the home and your access to computers. I shared earlier that we did needs assessments, and we started doing that during the pandemic. And we learned through that only about 40% of PK-12 households, or about 40%, lacked full digital access. Many parents were struggling with, basic communications. 1 in 3 of the families of the parents that we work with didn't even have an email address. And, so much of the expectation of communications, and not just schools, but certainly schools, that communication happens through emails, or you need an email in order to access Aries or some other learner management system to know, your students' grades. And so, without going in and making sure that folks have that understanding, it's a tremendous challenge. And it doesn't just affect their their access to education, but all kinds of other processes of doing everything from banking to interacting with city services. These are critical skills that for many of us we take for granted, and for certain communities, if you don't have access, you're left behind.
Thank you.
I 100%, agree with that. It's for all those reasons that Dr. Ryan mentioned, that it's critical. And when we think about being a competitive country, right, in the world right now, economically, like we want to be first in everything, and we are first in everything, but that can't happen without ensuring that broadband access and that the workforce ubiquitously are on the same page when it comes to skills, right? We see our economy and technology changing so quickly, but when we have populations that are still behind, that does not support local economies, right? That does not support regional economies, state economy, national economy. So when we think about, the economic benefits and opportunities that the internet provides, they're massive. Like our economy now, modern economy, is built on the internet when you think about it. It's shopping online banking, as Dr. Ryan mentioned, people work on the internet. We're conducting this interview on the internet. And yet there are communities that are being left behind. And now in the advent, I shouldn't even say advent because it's the AI is here, artificial intelligence is here. We're moving from a digital divide to a digital cliff. And not just impacting those without broadband access, but now impacting those of us that still may not know how to operate with AI. That includes, I would say, like the vast majority of people, because it's still so new and we're all learning all the different AI platforms and how to use them, how to integrate them, right? So it is, beyond like the individual benefit, there's a massive economic benefit to being digitally literate. The other aspect to it that is, I think, as critical, and certainly I know you all care about it, everyone on, I do personally, is civic engagement and the intersection between digital access and confidence to engage in our civic institutions and civic conversations through technology access, right? Nowadays, we could email a legislator and express our opinion about something that we like or don't like happening at that policy level. We could sign a petition very easily online to say, I don't like what's happening over here. And so I think about it from that aspect too, and why it's so critical to ensure that folks don't just have the tools, but really understand how to use it to communicate and voice your opinion. I also think about it from a media literacy standpoint, right? There's so much content out there now, and anybody could create anything and say whatever they want, and it's becoming increasingly harder to decipher what is accurate, what's inaccurate, what's real, what's not real, especially with images. And so it becomes even more important to ensure that, in particular, disenfranchised communities, those that are actually being targeted by maybe, content that's not accurate, to ensure that they know how to assess that and make the best decision for themselves. So I really do think it's a life and death, sir. It sounds really extreme, but when we think about our democracy and civic society, it comes down to access, and it comes down to understanding content and making decisions around that.
Definitely, I agree with you. So how do we bridge that gap? And what are the challenges that the families in underserved communities have? And how do we bridge the gap so that this gets fixed, or equal as soon as possible?
I mean, I think that goes to the core of what we do at PIQE, and it's you could say empowering families, but it's really tapping into the latent power that families have, that they have a voice that they can that is, that they should be reaching out to legislators, that they should be asking questions of their teachers. And as society moves more and more online, and you don't have those skills, especially if you're not confident in your English skills, it compounds the technology divide, puts you even further behind in your ability to advocate, or even having the information that you ought to have to make decisions or to know who to reach out to. So it is critical, to the core work that we do at PIQE of helping families to understand how the educational system works, confidence in asking questions, the ability to know that, if your child is placed in a non-honors track, you have every right to go back and say, this doesn't seem right. How can I suggest or look at, asking questions about A through G requirements. All of that is really important. And when you pair that with digital literacy, parents now have the ability to better inform the kinds of questions that they're asking. And so I see it very much related, and we by no means are the experts in digital literacy. And that's where it's really, really important that we have partners like everyone on to work together to advance that joint mission.
Norma, I'd like to hear your perspective on this, on the challenges and how to bridge the gap.
Challenges, yes. So I've mentioned already, affordability is critical to this, right? So before, I think of the internet as basic infrastructure, and it is like it's a utility. It's turning on the light, turning on the water faucet, right? The roads that we drive on the streets, like it's basic infrastructure on which everything is now being built on, businesses, in civic institutions, etc. So before, we need to ensure that our infrastructure is there and it's accessible and that it's affordable. And I think that is one of our challenges. Before the pandemic, we were getting closer to affordable internet. Post-pandemic, though there were several programs that aimed to do that, like the Affordable Connectivity Program, the Emergency Broadband Benefits. Those have now been eliminated, and so has other federal funding that was going to support building out our broadband infrastructure to ensure it's accessible and affordable. Those have all now been essentially eliminated. And so the concept of affordability around broadband is getting harder and harder to reach. But I do think that is critical to this conversation, where it's a big challenge. We are still, we have, unfortunately, families who are very low income, and find it hard to pay $30 a month for broadband, and faced with a decision around food and rent and gas and other things that need to be paid for to live, they're not going to choose broadband at $75 a month. That's the average cost of internet, high-speed internet right now. That doesn't match with a family whose household income is below 40,000, right? As an example. And so that is, I think, a big challenge here for us. But to Dr. Ryan's point, I think where there is hope and there is promise and opportunity is certainly around partnerships, right? And the kind of partnership that PIQE and Everyone On have, where PIQE has very rooted in community through schools and with parents, and teaching them about advocacy and about information, and pairing it with the digital access piece so folks could continue to do that, in a digital format. And that is, I think, the part of the secret sauce is the partnerships, and identifying how do we complement each other's programs, how do we amplify our collective impact that we know and we've proven has worked. One of the things that we did at Everyone On a few years ago was conduct a study to understand the experiences of women that go through our digital skills training. We realized that a lot of our participants who were coming to the classes were women. Most of them, I think, also at PIQE are likely moms, right, that participate in the trainings. And so we were very curious, like, what's driving women to these classes, right? What's motivating them? What's influencing them? What are they getting out of it? So not looking at our content, not assessing the curriculum, but really trying to understand their experience or journey. And something that came out of there was that women feel, they come in feeling a bit of shame, if you will, that they are dependent on their kids to help them navigate Zoom, to help them navigate using an app, but they come out feeling, 100% of them share, they came out feeling much more empowered, much more confident to be able to do anything, not just navigate the internet, but to do anything. And so the challenge is, how do we scale that? How do we reach more moms? How do we reach more parents, right? And when we're facing, unfortunately, reductions in funding or limited funding across all levels, federal, state, local, that becomes a challenge. How do we ensure that families and folks that need the in-person, high-touch support aren't being overlooked because there isn't enough funding? And so I would say those two are the big challenges when I think about our work, is the affordability and the lack of dedicated resources for this type of work.
Dr. Alcantara, focusing a little bit on the education, on learning, what does it really mean for parents trying to support their kids' education? How does digital equity and digital literacy, or the lack of, affect these families?
Well, as I shared previously, so much of our interaction with educational institutions is electronic. whether it's setting up accounts that require you to have an email. I have two kids, one in college and one in high school. You've got orientation documents that you're reviewing and approving online. Our system is just set up to be in an electronic space. And as I've shared before, the limited access that families have really inhibit their ability to be, full advocates and support their children. We had 17% of children who were unable to complete homework due to limited internet access, and 12 to 26% of families across the regions that we still serve were lacking the necessary equipment at home. And so again, that means either relying on a phone or not doing anything at all, which can be interpreted by an educational institution as that, oh, they don't care, or that's but it's taking the time to explain why it's important. And I think of those core functions like being able to see your students' grades, or receiving alerts related to, or submitting IEP documentation and sharing that information, or even the newsletters that you get from schools. All of that, it used to come in paper and in the student's backpack, and more that comes in electronic space, and your ability to be that advocate, and the students' access to technology at home, it's exponentially more important as students progress to higher education, to be able to navigate those spaces, and not having that context, not having that access. You think of community colleges that offer both colleges and universities that offer online courses, and that's a great option if you have internet at home where you can access those courses. Without that, your ability to navigate the educational system is greatly inhibited. And I know we're going to get into AI, like it then sets the tone for the long term, the next major digital divide, which I see is artificial intelligence.
Exactly. This is why we have both of you together in the show, because I think the partnership between Everyone On and PIQE is perfect. PIQE teaches parents how to navigate the educational system, but it's different. Now we need the experts in digital equity and literacy and everything to work with us together, right? And that way we can really help these families achieve their dreams. So I would like to talk a little bit more about the partnership between PIQE and Everyone On. Where do you see this partnership going, and how do you think it can make a difference in the communities that we serve? Norma, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So we love the partnership that we have with PIQE for the reasons that you mentioned, right? It's a great, very complementary partnership in that we are able to collectively impact families in a very meaningful way. So linking what they're learning at PIQE in terms of the educational system, that structure, how to advocate for their students, linking that with the digital access and the digital know-how so that they could do that on a different level. And I think about the families, the moms, the guardian, whoever it is in a particular household, how much time they would save themselves, and that they do now after going through our digital literacy class, from going into a classroom after work, maybe trying to get out of work early and find a babysitter for other kids to try to have a conversation with a teacher or a principal. They save so much time now because now they could do that by sending an email, by downloading the app, the parent portal app, and communicate more directly and expeditiously with whoever they're trying to communicate with. So that is so impactful. And we may not think about, that, like, wait, this actually helps save families time from having to go into the school. right? And so that is very meaningful and significant for a parent, for a guardian that may have to take time off of work to have to do that, or may have to find a babysitter or take public transportation to do that, right? And so I think it's wonderful that we're able to bring our organizations and services together. We currently do that and have been doing it in Los Angeles, in Bakersfield. You have a wonderful team in Sonia there, also in the Bay Area. And so the fact that Everyone On is also a national organization and that we have place-based regions in LA, the Bay Area, Central Valley, is complementary in that way too with PIQE. So, my vision for it is continuing to do the partnership, continuing to serve even more families, and how we get more creative around introducing concepts like AI and advocacy and media literacy, and those things that are very present, I think, in all of our minds when it comes to just access to tools and information to help families and therefore communities thrive, right, in our current environment.
Thank you. Dr. Alcantara, anything you want to add about the partnership?
Well, I'll share. We've had to develop a digital literacy module, especially for our virtual programming, kind of as it starts, so that parents can navigate the courses that we do. But through partnership with Everyone On, can really provide much more depth in the understanding and expand family members' understanding of in many ways fully utilizing some of the tools that they already have. I mean, you think of the computing power available, and most folks have smartphones. Really understanding how to utilize that technology combined with increased confidence in getting information. I think, Norma, your example of moms wanting more and utilizing that confidence of wanting to do other things is exactly the kinds of vision that we have at PIQE, because it's not just about academic achievement within the household, but the next step in that process is engaging in your community and advancing your community. And as we've shared, the expectations and your ability to do that is greatly enhanced when you can navigate technology in an appropriate way. So it's wonderful that we can partner together. We're doing that across the state, and really look forward to continuing to do that work. And then on the policy side, making sure we're in spaces that we can advocate for those communities that have limited access. And Norma has done a great job of sharing just some of the challenges in the last couple of years. We have to be sure that folks understand the impact of kind of treating broadband as that'd be nice. No, it should be. It's an expectation. It's a utility in many ways, and so we have to make sure that communities understand that and empower families to advocate for that, so that they can fully engage in not just in the education of their children, but in their communities.
Yes. And by coming together, I think we can do so much more and just reach so many other families, so many more families. So let's talk about AI. Norma, as technology evolves, AI is becoming a bigger part of education and everyday life. How is the rise of AI changing what digital literacy needs to include? And what are the risks for underserved communities if they're left behind?
Mm-hmm. So I mentioned we go from a digital divide that was very focused around broadband access, devices, to now a digital cliff because of emerging and evolving technologies that we are just now coming to understand and integrate right into our everyday lives. And so absolutely, the introduction of AI changes so many things. It changes how we think about the content that we're seeing, that we're reading, that it informs our decisions and our votes, for example. That is monumental. It changes our productivity. So that's like the positive thing here, right? Like if we learn how to leverage it, it helps us write emails faster. It helps us learn new skills faster. It helps us communicate in a different way when we might be stuck. How do I say this in this way to this person, right? And so there's so many benefits, but that also means it comes with a lot of, challenges as well, because as I mentioned, there's, there could be a lot of confusion when we're seeing content that online that we don't know fully understand is if it's accurate or not, and what do we do that with that information, is critical. And because of that, digital skills and digital literacy become even more critical, right? Because that is how you're now receiving that content, is through a digital device. And so knowing how to use it, but knowing how to navigate the digital world becomes even more, as I mentioned, even more critical, so that we could, do the things that we need to do. So we at Everyone On have started to deliver a module that introduces our participants to artificial intelligence. And it's just a module to demystify what AI is, because everybody's hearing about it. Our communities are hearing about it, but they may not know what it means, what it does, how could they use it. So we developed a curriculum that demystifies that, that breaks it down. Like, this is what it means. These are the different tools. And this is how you could apply it in very practical ways in your everyday life. And so we're starting to introduce it so that folks just become a little bit more familiar with it, hopefully a little bit more confident, and it gives them the stepping stone to then discover how much more they could do with it in whatever way they may want to do it for themselves. I think the other part that we all need to be thinking about is, data is feeding AI, right? If you think about ChatGPT, for example, as one of the platforms out there, it's gathering data, everything it finds online, but also whatever is feeding it, right? Whatever is warming it. And so how do we make sure that communities that are going to be most impacted by this, whether positively or negatively, know that they have an opportunity to help inform or educate this AI in a way that's going to be reflective of very diverse perspectives, not just one-sided, which is, I think, what we've been mainly seeing, right? Who's behind developing this, right? And so it is critical for communities, we think, to have an opportunity to participate in that way as well. So not just consume it and use it and continue to, feed it from this side, but feed it from the other side that's going to provide then more diverse perspectives and options for people to then employ in their everyday life.
That's an amazing point. I hadn't even thought about it. It's true. It's like we can tell our story, everybody, whoever, we can help fit what everyone else is learning about. Also, I wonder, Norma, how are parents taking the AI module? What do they think of it? How are they receiving it?
Yeah, positively. I think, folks come in definitely with fear and concern and questions, and especially parents of K through 12 students who they know their kids are using it, but they don't know how to use it. And so just like we know with many other things, right? TikTok, and I know my kids on it and they're using it, but I don't know anything about it. Same thing, but it's in the AI sphere now. And so folks come in definitely with their concerns, with their questions, apprehension. But once they go through this introductory course, folks definitely feel much more informed and equipped to be able to take their learning to the next level. So we have found it to be very well received. They learn, like 100% of our participants have shared that they've learned a lot and that they feel more confident to navigate the tools now moving forward.
Very interesting.
I think
Dr. Alcantara, yes.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's such an important point of just demystifying the technology. In schools, I'll say from the higher ed perspective, certainly institutions of higher education, we're still figuring out in many ways how to navigate that system. But too often, because there's certainly a downside, and there's lots that we could talk about of the challenges, but for those, not understanding, that can be a reason of, I'm not going to engage in it. And that ability to understand and help your student to navigate it, make the right decisions on how do you utilize this tool, because whether we like it or not, it's here. And Norma, you pointed out, a lot of the benefits of productivity and navigate. There's a lot of bad ways to do it or shortcuts that can get you in a lot of trouble. I'll just say in the educational sector, and parents understanding and their ability to help their students navigate that is essential. And I'll just say on the other side, the workforce development, it's increasingly an expectation on the workforce. And it's important that students are going through their education and developing those schools. If their school or there's those skills, and if their schools aren't assisting them, they've got to kind of figure out how to put that together. But it provides a lot of opportunity for parents to grow their skill sets. And I'll just share another point. I teach graduate programs, and I've taught a lot of international students over 15 plus years that I've taught classes. And over the last few years, definitely improved in grammar. I used to spend a lot of time. And so if you think of graduate students, there's a lot of sophistication with this technology. And so they've learned how to navigate. And I just think of that power and the confidence that it gives a student in their ability to write or to communicate complex thoughts, thick texts that they're navigating, and they can do that in a more effective way. I see the opportunity to provide those tools to the families that we serve. There is oftentimes a hesitancy. I mean, I was as coming from a bilingual household, you end up being the translator, and it's not that your parents don't have good questions. It's just I don't know the language, so you can do it. Utilizing translation software that's readily available, that's on your phone, to be able to craft that message to your school, that's incredibly powerful. And suddenly you're not on the periphery, but you're right there directly interacting with the school, and it doesn't necessarily have to be mediated by your child. Those are some of the easy wins that we can provide families with, that again align with the work that we do of activating the voice of the families we serve. And that's just not in the school system, that's across the board, and your ability to interact with your city and your elected officials, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. It sounds like we crafted our next program together, our next project. That how do we, beyond teaching folks the basics of it, like what is AI, is like, okay, how do we use it in this context, right? Because I think the example you gave it's amazing. Like, we could enter in Spanish into one of the platforms. How do I craft a message to a principal and translate it for me and copy and paste, right? And so that's where we bring together all the things that we work on, right? The access piece, the skills piece, the confidence piece, the understanding of importance of communicating with the administrator, et cetera. So it sounds like we have our next engagement set up. Yeah.
I'm excited. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I love that it comes just from a conversation. We already have something new. There's so many more things that we can do together.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is, like you said, Dr. Ryan, like the technology is here. And certainly it comes with a lot of, challenges, as we know, so many implications from an environmental perspective, from policy perspective, right? That, this is not the podcast to talk about, but that is a reality. And so how do we grapple with that and while also ensuring that communities are not left behind, right? Because from a economic mobility, social mobility aspect, it's critical that families have access to it. They know how to use it so that they could, elevate their families, change, do the things that they want to do with them. And so it's not one or the other. It's both. How do we address the challenges, but also how do we ensure communities aren't left behind?
And how do we anticipate, how this is going to change over time? It's not a far stretch. I mean, you're already seeing differences in AI technology that's free versus paid. And I'm not saying that folks shouldn't be able to monetize the programming and the work that they're doing, but where it provides, social mobility and an opportunity. Like I said earlier, like this, it potentially is the next digital divide. Even if I had the insight of how to utilize it, the AI I have access to, it's cost prohibitive to get something that's more powerful. And so we have to understand that. We have to engage with elected officials, and talk as members of the community to make sure folks have access to technology that is expected. And so very similar to broadband.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So before we finish our conversation, I think it's very important for us to tell our listeners, like, if they're feeling like if something of this resonated with them, they feel they need more help, they feel like their community needs better digital equity, whatever, how can they not just reach PIQE and everyone on, but what else can they do?
I will highlight here that libraries have been amazing institutions offering not just access to books, obviously, but services like digital literacy. And they are just wonderful hubs where in LA, many of our libraries, and certainly the Central Library in downtown LA, have what they call digital ambassadors. Sometimes they call them digital navigators. And these are folks that are trained to provide one-on-one, hands-on support to anybody that walks in and says, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to fill out my citizenship application, or I need to renew, my driver's license online. I don't know how to do it. They provide that kind of support. And so I would say, that's a resource for folks if they want to brush up on some skills or need some immediate help. The other thing is to ask for these kind of resources and trainings and programs at their schools. Schools are also, there to support community. Some schools have, if not all of them, have computer labs. And so how do they use those to also support parents and guardians that are interested in brushing up on their skills? So asking for that. And I think that's, the whole point of PIQE is empowering parents and guardians to advocate for themselves and their students. And I would certainly encourage that. And especially now, because as I mentioned earlier, there's less funding for this type of work, for digital literacy work, and yet we need to be digitally literate. And so how do we leverage existing institutions and partnerships like we have here to be able to continue to provide these type of programs in communities?
Yep. And I would echo, talking to your student's teacher, school leadership. What are we doing? What does the access to technology look like? How are we teaching utilization of AI? Can we do classes for parents? You have the right to ask, and there are limited resources, but many schools are doing great things, and it's certainly an opportunity to just understand what that messaging is at your school. And I would also say, for programming, if PIQE is at your school, great, enrolling or asking about it or reaching out to us or everyone on, we work with schools and school districts and would love to expand our ability to work with more schools. And so family voices are powerful, so utilize that.
That's correct. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up our conversation, Dr. Alcantara, Norma?
I don't think I have anything else. No, this was great.
Yeah, I'll just thank you, Norma, for being such a wonderful partner with PIQE and for spending some time with us on this podcast.
Yes, it was wonderful conversation. I'm so happy you all are doing this. And spreading the good word about the work that we're doing and the importance of digital access when it comes to, achieving these wonderful goals that we have for our organizations and communities. So thank you for the invitation, and look forward to the continued partnership and collaboration.
Thank you both for being here today. This conversation really shows how important digital access is for families and students, and how much we can achieve when we work together. To our listeners, be sure to visit pique.org and everyoneon.org for more information, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Like, subscribe, and share so that more people can join the conversation. Thank you, and until next time.